back to Nerd Safari, my friends. I am Simon, your Mustang nerd, and this is my first and only Ford Mustang, a 2002 Newedge Mustang GT convertible that I love. Everything I learned about it, I learned through YouTube. Thank you, YouTube. And I'm going to talk to you today about my top 5 reasonably cheap and reasonably easy successful Mustang mods. When I first bought this car, the sound system was a mess. There was a really cheap, barely functioning aftermarket head stereo unit. There was an amp that had been water damaged. I had maybe 2 speakers in the car that were working. And originally I ripped out the seats because I know this model Mustang actually has a pretty decent stereo system installed from day one. Unfortunately, the previous owner had, for some crazy reason, ripped that out. So what was in there was this broken amp, broken head unit. I had heard that our local Best Buy had a really top-notch installation guy who knew a ton about car audio. So I took my car straight down there and he agreed with me that what was in there was just garbage and I was better to do a rip and replace, throw out the whole lot. So what I bought was a Pioneer head unit and I'm super impressed with that. It's touchscreen, it has Bluetooth, everything I could possibly want. I also bought 4 kicker speakers and a kicker amp to power those 4 speakers. Relatively small, but I had plans to add subwoofers later on. I specifically didn't buy a head unit with GPS built in. I figure this day and age, everybody's got a cell phone. I'm just going to use my phone for that. The only problem I had with this was when Best Buy installed the unit, for some reason they did not install the cable that runs from the head unit to the parking brake. With that cable in place, what should have happened is that I can access settings that are otherwise locked down. Now, all I did to rectify that was just bought a cheap bypass from Amazon that makes the head unit think that the parking brake is on all the time. I decided to do that rather than run a cable down to the parking brake. I'm the only driver of the car, so I know I'm not going to be watching DVDs or whatever when I'm driving, so it's pretty safe. I ran on that sound setup for over a year and I was really happy with it, but it was definitely lacking bass. So recently I saw on Amazon a sweet deal on some MTX Terminator subwoofers, 12-inch subs, and a corresponding amp. I decided to do the installation of those subwoofers myself, and I'm going to do a whole video just detailing step by step my journey through that process. But suffice to say, with those subwoofers in place, I've got a ton of bass in the car. It sounds awesome now. I know some people are super serious about keeping their Mustangs stock, and I can completely understand that. However, one thing I really did not like about the Newedge Mustang were the tail lights. I thought they were kind of dim, they just didn't have the classic Mustang look about them. So I opted to replace them with these Spec D LED smoked sequential tail lights. So to start with, they're LED, so they're super bright even in the daytime. And honestly, I find that a safety feature as much as anything else. They also, because they're sequential, they flash when you put your turn signals on. And I'll tell you, even a year after installing them, still puts a smile on my face to see those flashing lights during the turn signal. They just look awesome. Installation on these lights was an absolute breeze. I was kind of worried about buying a lesser known brand, but they plugged exactly into where the previous lights were. Setting up the wiring was just plug and play as well. No hassles at all. This next one was an experiment, honestly, just because I was bored. I figured that I'm sat in that car most days just looking at that dash, and that grey plastic Newedge dash was really getting me down. So I also noticed that most of the dash components either just pop out, you can just pull them out, or they screw out, or there's like 1 or 2 simple bolts to remove them. So one by one, I went around the cabin, picked out various bits and pieces, and I just sprayed them with cheap Rust-Oleum silver gloss paint. And I've got to say, I love the effect of it. Every time I'm sat there and I'm looking at the silver rather than boring dark grey, just puts a smile on my face, and sometimes that's good enough. I also really didn't like the grey plastic AC knobs, so I replaced those with some chrome knobs. I've heard people complain that they get a little hot in the sun, but so far I haven't had any issues with those. When I painted these components, I only used a couple of coats of paint, so not surprisingly, there are areas where it's looked a little scuffed or worn after a while. But actually just popping those components out, respraying them with a couple more coats of paint, and dropping them back in is super easy, so I've had no issues doing that. I've always loved the look of red brake calipers. Call me cheesy, but it just looks like a sports car to me. I did some research, and of course most people say take your brake calipers out of the car in order to spray them, and that's fair advice, but I found some brave YouTubers who had actually painted their brake calipers in place, so I decided to give that a whirl. I bought myself a couple of jack stands to be able to jack the car up, remove the wheels, and then I masked all around the wheel arch with paper so that I wouldn't get paint spraying over the bodywork of the car. First of all, I cleaned off the brake calipers thoroughly. I started off with just good old-fashioned soap and water. After that, I moved on to rubbing alcohol and steel wool, and I really got those brake calipers super clean because I didn't want to be painting over the top of dirt that would just flake off. Next up, I bought some specific brake caliper paint from Amazon that was really inexpensive, and I got to work. And I found pretty swiftly that, first of all, brake calipers need quite a few coats of paint. I found there were bits where the paint just didn't adhere to the brake calipers well, and I needed to go over it a few times. But the paint dried in about 10 to 15 minutes for a second coat, so it really wasn't a big deal. The effect at the end of the day, I was really happy with. The red was eye-catching, it was smooth, it looked very professional for something that just took me an hour on a Sunday. Next, I get pretty bored one weekend. I was going to take the car to a car show, and I decided, why don't I clean the engine bay? So, cleaning the engine bay, and I'm looking at various pipes and things, thinking, I got a lot of that brake caliper paint left over. So I sprayed the cold air intake, I sprayed the fuse box cover, any little bits and pieces that I could find that I could spray to just give them a red accent. And again, I really like how it looks. It's very different. I know I promised you my top 5 mods, but please indulge me this one small extra. Last Christmas, my sister bought me this Ford Mustang parking only sign, and it just puts a smile on my face every time I drive up and see it outside my house. And I feel that that's fine. Why not just indulge ourselves in those little pieces of fun that make life more pleasurable? That's it from me, my top 5 Mustang mods that are easy and achievable even for a beginner like me. I will see you next time to talk about mods that did not go so well. My name's Simon, I'm your Mustang nerd. Peace out, my friends.